My mother barged through the glass doors like she owned the place. My father was right behind her, shouting my name. I was in the middle of presenting a concept board to the Rutledge team, one of our highest profile clients. The conference room had been silent a moment earlier, all eyes on the mock-ups projected behind me. Now, gasps, awkward glances, Jason dropping his tablet. The entire room shifted from professionalism to pandemonium in under 3 seconds. Nora Elizabeth Ellison. My father's voice boomed across the polished floor. We need to talk. Now. I froze. For half a breath, I thought maybe this was a misunderstanding, that they'd made a mistake and would realize it any second. But no. My mother was already striding past the glass wall, lips pursed, fury blazing in her eyes. She didn't care who was watching, and she never had. It wasn't the first time they had crossed a line, but it was the first time they'd done it here, on my turf, in front of my team, my clients. And that made it worse than any insult they'd thrown in the privacy of our family dinners. I'm in the middle of a meeting, I said, voice low, controlled. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, the pounding in my ears. You need to leave. Margaret Ellison, former CFO of Ellison Design and permanent critic of my life choices, scoffed. You think you can shut us out while you flush everything your father and I built down the toilet? Behind her, Charles's face was red with rage. Your mother's right. This company was never supposed to be yours alone. I stepped forward, trying to put my body between them and the clients. This isn't the time. We can discuss this later. Jason appeared at my side, tense, eyes darting between me and my parents. Should I call security? No, I said quickly, waving him off. That would only escalate it, and they would love the drama. Oh, don't act like we're the problem, my mother snapped. You're the one refusing to support your sister. After everything she gave up. She didn't give up anything, I said, trying to keep my voice even. I did. I gave up my scholarship so she could go to Brown. Jason's eyes flicked toward me. I knew he hadn't heard that story. Most people hadn't. I never advertised it. But now it was out, flung like a shield in front of a room full of spectators. Nicole's voice crackled from a FaceTime call my mother held up like some strange moral evidence. Nora, you said you'd help me. I thought we were past all this. You're 30, Nicole, I snapped, my composure cracking just enough to cut. You're not owed anything. She's your sister, my father said, stepping forward. And we are your parents. Your success came from our sacrifice. Their words slammed into me like bricks, layered with decades of guilt, obligation, and the ever-present reminder that my wins were never really mine in their eyes. Not when they believed they had written the blueprint. I built this company, I said, my voice shaking despite my efforts. And I built it without taking a dime from either of you. Don't come in here and claim ownership. Oh, please, Margaret said. You would have been nothing without our connections. The Rutledge team was practically frozen at the table. One of them, a younger guy, probably an analyst, looked like he wanted to disappear under the desk. The lead designer from their team gave me a look that was half pity, half judgment. Charles raised his voice again, louder this time, as though volume would validate his authority. You've destroyed everything we built. This company was meant for family. Silence fell like a dropped curtain. I looked at the stunned faces surrounding me. My chest ached with the strain of holding in tears, rage, and humiliation. The pitch was ruined, my leadership questioned, my personal life exposed like a wound. I turned to the clients, meeting their eyes. Give me 5 minutes, please. I wasn't born with a silver spoon. I built the damn spoon myself. The city lights flickered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my apartment, casting a sterile glow over the untouched dinner on my counter. My heels were still by the door, jacket slung on the back of the chair, and my phone, still buzzing from the madness that morning, sat face down on the kitchen island. But even turned over, it couldn't hide the damage. I picked it up anyway, Thumbing the screen awake to reveal a barrage of messages. Nicole had clearly spent her entire afternoon funneling her hurt into venom. Nicole. Wow. Thanks for humiliating Mom and Dad. Again. Nicole. You said you'd support me. What happened to being a real sister? Nicole. Maybe you enjoy watching me struggle. Always have. I exhaled slowly, trying to keep the nausea from crawling up my throat. And then Margaret's texts started populating the thread. Mom, your selfishness has no bounds. Mom, everything your father and I gave, and this is how you repay us? Mom, Nicole needs help, and all you care about is impressing strangers in suits. It was always this way. Always. No matter how much I gave, it wasn't enough. No matter how quietly I carried the weight, I was still labeled ungrateful when I dared to set boundaries. I dropped the phone and sank onto the couch. The soft leather creaked under me as my muscles finally loosened from the rigidity they'd held all day. I remembered a different version of this apartment. A decade ago, it had been a 2-room rental shared with 3 other girls, and I worked nights at a campus cafe while pulling double credits. Nicole was still in high school then, skipping classes to hang out with her friends, while I sent money home every month so she could have new clothes, private tutoring, even a car before she turned 18. And when I got the full ride to Cambridge, I gave it up. The memory hit like a slap. I had just gotten the letter, still warm from the envelope. I'd sat on the front porch with the acceptance in my hand, heart beating out of my chest. And then Nicole had come home, sobbing about how she couldn't handle senior year without me around. Our parents looked at me like I had the power to fix everything. Again. So I did. Instead of Cambridge, I stayed. A ping from my phone broke through the silence. A voice message. I opened it. Brandon. Hey, I saw the clip someone posted. From your office. That was brutal. Just wanted to check. Are you okay? His voice was lower than I remembered, a little rougher. We hadn't spoken in months, maybe years if you didn't count birthday texts. But something in the way he said it, the hesitation between the words, told me he understood. Really understood. Brandon had always been a little on the outside, too. Not as loud, not as favored. A smart kid with sharp eyes, always watching the rest of us scramble for approval we'd never get. I didn't reply right away. I couldn't. Instead, I wandered toward the shelf in the hallway where old photo albums lived in half-forgotten dust jackets. One had a cracked plastic cover, the pages warped from too many hands flipping through. Graduation photos. Nicole's, not mine. Mine had been a blur. Small, rushed, understated. Nicole's, though? The whole family had flown in, dressed in coordinated colors. I turned the pages until I found it. Her smiling in a white dress, arms full of roses, parents beaming. And behind the camera, I remembered. Me. Still in a cafe apron, taking time off between shifts to drive 4 hours just to get there in time. There was no photo of me in that album. I closed it carefully, setting it back with a trembling hand. The screen of my phone lit up again. Instagram. Nicole had posted something. A blurry picture of a wine glass on a balcony, the skyline behind it. Captioned simply, "Blood doesn't mean loyalty." I stared at it for a long time. The cold, deliberate cruelty of it settled deep in my chest. She wanted the world to know she'd drawn the line, and that I had crossed it. The ping came at 2:07 a.m. One notification. A mistake. My body stirred before my mind caught up. I blinked into the darkness, unsure what had pulled me from sleep. Then the screen of my iPad glowed faintly on the nightstand beside me. Just one notification. iMessage. A name I hadn't seen in a while. Nicole. Group chat. And she sat there like she was the Queen of England, all high and mighty with her little office and her fake power. My breath caught. I didn't recognize the group name at first. Ellison Legacy Crew. Until memory crashed in. Months ago, Nicole had borrowed my iPad during a weekend stay. Something about needing it for a work project. I'd never logged out of my Apple ID, and clearly she hadn't either. That group chat had been quiet for ages, or so I thought. I sat up in bed, letting the darkness settle back around me like a heavy quilt. My finger hovered over the message. I tapped it. A wall of messages exploded across the screen, and each one chipped away at something I hadn't realized was still whole inside me. Aunt Meredith. Nora always played the martyr. So calculated. Like every sacrifice was a notch on her belt. Nicole. Right? She still brings up the scholarship thing like anyone begged her to stay. Cousin Jordan. I mean, would she even have a company if it weren't for Uncle Charles? He practically built her foundation. Cousin Elise. Some CEO. Can't even handle a family dinner without imploding. I gripped the tablet, my thumb frozen over the keyboard. The silence in my apartment was unbearable. My pulse thudded loud in my ears, louder than any shouting from the day before. Public humiliation was its own kind of violence. But this, betrayal whispered between relatives in the dark corners of digital space, this was worse. I scrolled back, needing to know how far it went. Dozens of messages, conversations I was never meant to see. Nicole. She has no real friends. Her assistant probably pities her. Meredith. Well, she certainly inherited Charles's pride, and none of his humility. Jordan. Let's be real. She's nothing without us. Just a lonely woman with a chair and a title. My hand trembled. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just sat there, the chill of betrayal crawling over my skin like frost. I took a screenshot. Then another, and another. 43 before I stopped counting. They were careless, arrogant, comfortable in their disdain. I wasn't sure what disturbed me more, the words themselves or how freely they came. No one in the thread ever defended me. No one paused to say maybe she tried. Maybe she gave more than we saw. No one wondered if I bled in silence. The chat went quiet just before 3 a.m., as if they'd exhausted their appetite for tearing me down. I stared at the last message for a long time. Nicole. She doesn't even realize how pathetic she looks, clinging to this company like it makes her somebody. I powered off the iPad and laid it beside me, the screen now black, but its contents scorched into my memory. I wasn't sure what I'd do with those screenshots. Not yet. But something in me, something old and weary and so tired, had shifted, like a cracked foundation giving way to something sharper underneath. Because now I knew. This wasn't just about hurt feelings or family drama. They didn't see me as one of them. They never had. The first thing I did Tuesday morning was call my lawyer. The second was change the locks. The maintenance guy raised an eyebrow when I handed over the request form, but said nothing. I could see the question behind his silence. What kind of daughter has to change the locks on her parents? I didn't answer. I couldn't. By the time I stepped out into the morning chill, Dana Whitmore was already seated at our usual corner table at the street cafe off Lexington. A silver laptop open, black coffee half drunk, blazer crisp as always. She looked like the kind of woman no one dared interrupt, a presence I desperately needed around me. Nora, she said, her eyes narrowing as I slid into the seat across from her. I watched the footage. Security cameras don't lie. They never do, I murmured. I wish I could say I was surprised. I sighed. It's not the first time, but it's the first time they humiliated me in front of a client. Dana tapped something on her keyboard. I pulled up our old files, the estate plans, your board structure, power of attorney forms. They don't have legal access to anything. But that doesn't mean they won't try. You need to document every incident, every call, message, confrontation. Assume this is going to escalate. I stared into my own coffee, barely tasting it. They said I destroyed the family legacy, but they were the ones who refused to earn any of it. Dana raised an eyebrow. You gave up a scholarship for your sister. You built this company from scratch with your own portfolio. You paid your dues 10 times over. If anyone's the legacy, it's you. Her words shouldn't have made me tear up, but they did. I blinked hard and nodded. Thank you. I needed that. Back at the office, I asked Jason to pull up recent activity logs on the internal systems. He hesitated, eyes flicking toward my door. Is this about yesterday? Just humor me, I said. And Jason? Change the passwords. All of them. He nodded and disappeared. 10 minutes later, a ping sounded on my monitor. Unauthorized access attempt. The marketing reserve account. A familiar name attached. Nicole Ellison. I stared at the screen. That fund was allocated for Q4 ad campaigns, not for paying off student loans or whatever nonsense she'd decided she deserved. Enough. I drafted a formal notice, legal speak included. Effective immediately, all family members were to be removed from non-essential system access. I CC'd the board liaison and Dana. Then I opened a separate tab and began typing another message. This one, less formal. To Nicole Ellison. Subject, boundaries. Nicole, I've tolerated a lot, but yesterday crossed a line. So did your attempt to access company funds. I've revoked your permissions. If you have any questions, direct them to legal. Nora. I hit send without reading it twice. 2 hours later, her reply came. If I go down, I'm dragging your perfect face with me. I read the line 3 times, each word more venomous than the last. Nicole had always been reactive, but this was different. Threatening, calculated, dangerous. Dana was on speed dial before I even finished reading. She's escalating, I said. I figured she would. Dana replied coolly. I've seen this before. With your father, actually. He did something similar to a business partner years ago. That stopped me cold. Wait, what? There's a pattern here, Nora. Your family doesn't lose gracefully. And when they lose control, they turn vicious. I swallowed hard. So what now? She didn't hesitate. You need to prepare for war. This won't stay quiet. They always said I was cold. What they meant, I didn't break. The walls of the boardroom were made of glass, but I'd learned long ago how to treat them like armor. The city skyline reflected off the surface behind me, but I was focused on the weight in my chest. The familiar hum of pressure that hadn't left since Monday. A message from Brandon came through just after 10 a.m. Brandon, heads up. They're planning a family meeting. You're not invited. Aunt Meredith's leading the charge. I stared at it, my breath catching for a moment. Not invited. Of course not. This was never about reconciliation. It was about regaining control. 3 years ago, I would have gone anyway. I would have begged to be heard, explained my decisions, tried to smooth it over like I always did. But 3 years ago, I was still holding the wreckage together with bare hands. I swiveled in my chair and reached for the small drawer under the bookshelf. Inside was a worn, leather-bound journal, my last physical record before I migrated everything digital. I hadn't touched it in over a year. I flipped through the pages until I landed on an entry, dated July 16th. Nicole's tuition is overdue again. Mom called in tears, said she's too stressed to sleep. Charles won't help this time. I told them I'd think about it. I almost transferred the $100,000 this morning. Still might. I stared at the last line, the hesitation. That moment had been a turning point. I remembered sitting at my desk, my finger hovering over the confirm transfer button, the cursor blinking like it could see into my soul. But I didn't do it. Not that time. And after that, I began to cut the ties. One joint account after another. It was the first time I told my family no and stuck to it. Now they were spinning that into proof of betrayal. A knock at the door pulled me out of the past. Jason stepped in, eyebrows furrowed. You've got mail, he said, holding up a thick envelope. It was marked urgent. Something feels off. I took it and slit the top with my letter opener. Inside was a lease agreement, one I'd never seen before. My name was printed across the top, alongside Nicole's. The signature next to mine was neat, convincing, and absolutely not mine. Jason leaned forward. Nora, is that your signature? No, I said softly, but it's close. It was dated 3 weeks ago, a luxury apartment downtown, Nicole's current address. My throat tightened. She forged it. Jason stayed quiet, but the muscles in his jaw twitched. I stood and crossed to the window, the lease still in my hand. My reflection stared back at me, shoulders straighter than I felt, eyes sharper than I remembered. The old Nora would have blamed herself, would have found a way to justify Nicole's desperation, to reason that maybe, somehow, she deserved the help. But I was done bleeding for people who turned my scars into weapons. I turned to Jason. Start a file. We're going to need everything. He nodded and slipped out, silent as a shadow. I looked down at the lease one more time. Then I walked to my desk, opened my laptop, and created a new document. Cease and desist. Preliminary draft. The cursor blinked at me like a metronome counting down to impact. They want war? I said, my voice quiet but clear. I'll give them one. Legally. And then I started typing. You know what they say? Receipts speak louder than tears. I stared at the folder on my desk, the digital equivalent of a ticking time bomb. 43 screenshots, all time-stamped, geotagged, and neatly arranged by topic. Dana had instructed me to start with the obvious ones: messages, group chat logs, forged documents. But what she didn't say out loud was just as clear. This wasn't about feelings anymore. This was about evidence. First rule, Dana said as she strode into my office, hair pulled into a sleek bun, leather case in hand. Make everything admissible. She set her laptop down and opened a shared folder. Metadata, file origins, verification trails. Anything digital can be dismissed without a proper chain of custody. We need to play this smart, Nora. Jason knocked once and entered, holding another folder. This came in from accounting. We pulled the last 6 months of expense reports. You're going to want to see this. I opened it and scanned the rows. Several recurring charges listed under my name. Consulting services, venue deposits, luxury hotels in my city. Only I'd never authorized any of it. I closed the folder. She's been using my name for months. Dana didn't flinch. That works in our favor. The more the pattern, the stronger our case. Still, the bile in my throat refused to settle. I'd assumed Nicole's desperation was recent. But this was premeditated. We moved to Dana's firm later that afternoon, where I was given a temporary room to work through more documents. The assistant helped digitize and notarize every screenshot under Dana's supervision. Every photo, every message, every forged agreement. Around 4 p.m., Jason called from my office. There's something you should see in the archives. That joint lease Nicole forged. It's not the first. My fingers clenched around the phone. You're sure? There's a storage account opened last year, signed under both your names, only you never touched it. Send it, I said. Minutes later, it appeared in the secure folder. Another document. Another signature that didn't belong to me, though it looked uncomfortably close. Dana reviewed it, then made a call. We're going to the bank. The air inside the branch was chilled, almost clinical. Mr. Keating, the bank manager, led us to a back office. His glasses slid down his nose as he examined the documents we laid out before him. 2 versions of my signature, both tied to major financial agreements. Miss Ellison, he said slowly, do you recall signing either of these documents? I pointed to the first one. That's my real signature, from 2 years ago. He nodded. And this one? I leaned closer. The slant was off. The flourish on the E exaggerated. To a stranger, it would look convincing. But I knew my own hand. That one's fake. Mr. Keating took both sheets and compared them under a verification light. We've had signature fraud cases before, but this is sophisticated. And dangerous. He turned to Dana. One of these signatures is definitely not hers. Dana didn't smile. She didn't nod. She simply said, "Get me the timestamp logs. We'll subpoena surveillance footage next." When we stepped back into the elevator, the weight of everything hit me at once. The betrayal, the cover-ups, the quiet campaign to destroy my credibility from within my own family. I looked at Dana. "You think they'll back off if we confront them with this?" She didn't blink. "If we go public with this, it's not just a family matter anymore." I wore red, not for elegance, for war. The gown was sleek, sharp-lined, and unapologetically bold. Crimson bled into satin, hugging every angle of my frame like a declaration. Jason had raised an eyebrow when I stepped out of the car. Brandon just grinned and muttered, "You're not here to blend in." And I wasn't. The Design Awards Gala wasn't just an industry soiree. It was the kind of room where rumors were currency and alliances were bartered over champagne. Nicole had once dreamed aloud, years ago, of receiving a last-minute invitation. She'd whispered her fantasy into the air, wide-eyed and laughing, while I sat beside her scribbling deadlines and client notes. Funny how things change. Tonight, I was the one invited, honored even, and I wasn't going to waste it. Inside, the ballroom glittered with light and polished ambition. Crystal chandeliers trembled above murmuring crowds. I spotted Brandon first, near the centerpiece installation we'd sponsored years ago, holding 2 glasses of Prosecco. He handed me one with a wink. "Weapon of choice?" "Distraction," I said. We circled the room, calculated but effortless. Smiles here, nods there. I waited until I saw him. Peter Langston, the senior partner at Kellner and Day. A name with reach, someone who'd once signed a massive design rollout with Ellison Design Group, until something soured between him and my father. Now was the time to reopen that memory. "Peter," I greeted, extending my hand. "It's been a while." He looked surprised. Pleasantly, I thought. "Nora Ellison. I'll be damned. Your name's been popping up lately." "All good things, I hope." I smiled. You know how family businesses can be. We're navigating some transitions, internal unrest, you might say. His brows lifted, intrigued. The kind that shifts ownership? Or the kind that buries it? "Too early to tell," I replied, sipping from my glass. "But if you're ever curious about legacy, I'm happy to talk." He chuckled. "Maybe I'll take you up on that." I excused myself just as the lights dimmed for the opening speech. That's when I saw her, Nicole. She appeared at the top of the staircase like she'd always belonged there. Silver sequins, gentle curls, a smile so performative it hurt to look at. She descended slowly, deliberately, like she knew all eyes would follow her. And when she reached me, she leaned in, all sugar and sweetness. "Nora, you look commanding." "Nicole," I returned, not missing a beat. "I didn't know you'd be here." "Last-minute invite," she said breezily. "Peter Langston's wife and I did a residency in Florence together." Of course, always the back door. Brandon reappeared at my side, jaw tight. He whispered low, "She's nervous. She knows something's coming." "I hope she does," I replied. The next hour blurred with polite conversations, clinking glasses, and subtle glances. Nicole played her role well, laughing at the right moments, grazing my arm for the cameras, painting a picture of familial harmony for anyone watching. But behind the curtain, backstage near the speaker's lounge, I found her whispering into her phone. "If she talks, I'm finished," she hissed. I didn't move, didn't breathe, just listened. Then I turned, left without a word, and walked to the coat check where my purse waited. Inside was a white card embossed with gold script. Dorian Fox, CEO. Ardent Luxe Design. Call me if you ever feel cornered. We hadn't spoken in years. He'd once been burned by a contract my father maneuvered out from under him. I'd always meant to reach out. Now I slid the card into an envelope, scrawled his name, and handed it to the concierge with one instruction. "Deliver this to Dorian Fox." Tonight. And then I walked out into the night, still in red, still at war. I didn't yell. I sent a PDF. It hit their inboxes at exactly 9 a.m. sharp. Time-stamped, notarized, and encrypted. A cease and desist letter that stripped away the last of my silence. Jason stood beside me, watching the progress bar turn green on every recipient. Nicole, my parents, Aunt Meredith, even that smug lawyer they kept on retainer, Mr. Halbridge, who once tried to bully my assistant during a vendor dispute. This wasn't a threat. It was the opening salvo of an official war. Dana was waiting for me at her firm. "It's done," she said, sliding her tablet across the table. "Copies are archived, verified, and submitted to the district clerk's office." I read the first few lines again, not because I needed to, but because I wanted to feel the weight of them. "To whom it may concern, as of this date, you are to immediately cease all unauthorized usage of the name, likeness, brand identity, and financial signature of Ms. Nora Ellison, ... The language was cold, sharp, legal steel. "Now we wait?" I asked. Dana shook her head. "Number now we monitor. Jason?" He pulled out his laptop and spun it toward me. Their Instagram bios have changed. Nora's name is scrubbed off Nicole's education highlights. Aunt Meredith deleted that LinkedIn post, claiming she helped co-found your firm. I swallowed the satisfaction down slowly. It didn't taste like victory. Not yet. This was just triage. A ping interrupted us. Diana glanced at her phone and frowned. "We've got something." She opened the email, scanned quickly, then looked at me. "Nicole's lawyer wants a private sit-down. No cameras, no transcripts." I sat up straighter. "So now she wants to talk?" Dana's voice was clipped. "They're framing it as a family resolution meeting. Terms will be verbal. No documentation." "No," I said immediately. "Absolutely not." Dana tilted her head slightly. "You sure?" "This could save you time. Stress. Cost." "I want everything documented," I replied. "I want a judge, a courtroom, and a record. I want the truth printed in black and white, page by page." Jason muttered under his breath, "Remind me never to get on your bad side." I half smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. The door opened and an assistant entered, handing Dana a manila envelope. "This just came. Messenger drop." She opened it, paused, then slowly turned it so I could see. It was a scanned copy of a stock purchase agreement. Ellison Design Group 5 years ago. My name was printed in bold across the top. The buyer line, Nora Ellison. Only, I never bought those shares. I'd refused that offer. I remembered vividly the conversation with my father, how he stormed out when I told him I didn't want to be complicit in the restructuring. Dana's brow furrowed. "This is bad." "Forgery?" Jason asked. She nodded. "Or worse. If they forged this and built business decisions around it, we're talking fraud on a corporate level." The paper trembled slightly in Dana's hands. I stared at the signature line. It wasn't mine. The loops were too perfect. The confidence, artificial. I took a breath. "It's not just personal anymore," I said. This is organized." Dana's eyes met mine. "Then it ends the same way, in court." And we both knew after this there would be no way back. ChatGPT John Noy. Just when I thought they had no more tricks, they bled me dry. It started with a call from my bank manager. A soft voice. Too polite for the news she carried, explaining that due to new compliance inquiries, all business accounts under Ellison Design Group would be temporarily restricted. I froze. "Restricted?" I asked, the word foreign in my mouth. "For 72 hours, she repeated, "pending audit findings and clarification of flagged activity." I barely had time to respond before Jason burst through the door. "You need to see this," he said, already pulling up a live stream on his phone. Nicole stood at a podium, glossy hair tucked behind her ears, a tailored blazer the color of frost. Behind her, the backdrop bore the Ellison Design Group logo, my company like a trophy she'd stolen. "I didn't want it to come to this," she began, voice trembling in expertly placed intervals. "But in light of recent developments, it is my duty as a member of the founding family to protect our legacy." Jason swore under his breath. 2 years ago, Nicole continued, significant sums were transferred from a restricted marketing fund to an offshore account. My sister Nora claimed full executive oversight at the time. These documents, she held up a folder with deliberate flair, were brought to our attention last week. "She's lying," I whispered. "There was no offshore account. I shut down that fund myself." Jason nodded. "I remember. You consolidated everything into domestic holdings when we changed banks." "But she has something," I said. "Where did she get those documents?" Before he could answer, my phone buzzed again, this time from Mr. Mendez, our second largest investor. "Nora," he said sharply without greeting. "You didn't think I'd find out? You were supposed to present full account transparency by next quarter. Now I have press at my office. I'm calling for a formal audit." "Mr. Mendez," I said, steadying my voice. "You know my record. My financial ethics." He cut me off. "You've got 72 hours to prove you're clean, or I pull out." The line went dead. I turned to Jason, panic threatening to rise in my chest. "We need to trace every transaction. Go back 2 years. Find the original documentation." He was already typing. "Pulling archived emails now." I walked to the window, pressing my fingers against the cool glass. Outside, the skyline looked unchanged. Inside, everything was shifting beneath my feet. My heart pounded, not with fear, but with fury. This was Nicole's move. Not just to attack, but to infect. To plant doubt where there had only been trust. Jason's voice broke through. "Found it." I turned. He looked pale. "There's a paper trail. Sort of. An email sent from your account 2 years ago, authorizing the transfer to an external account registered under a shell company." "That's not possible. I know." He spun the screen toward me. "But the metadata's been manipulated. This isn't the original message. The formatting's off, and the timestamp doesn't match server logs from that week." "Someone altered it," I said. Jason nodded. "And planted it on our backup server, disguised as a system restore point." I stared at the email. My signature. My words. My undoing. "Who did this?" I asked. Jason didn't answer at first. He just stared at the file. Then he leaned in, typing something quickly. After a long moment, he sat back slowly. "You're not going to like who planted the fake file," he said. I braced myself. "Say it," I whispered. He looked up. It was Brandon. "I built everything from scratch. I can build it again. But first, I'll burn the lies." The air in Brandon's old apartment was thick with dust and the scent of microwaved coffee. Boxes piled to the ceiling, one corner stacked with vintage circuit boards and tangled cords that hadn't been touched in years. He knelt by a metal storage bin and popped it open, his movements deliberate, avoiding eye contact with me. "This," he said, pulling out a battered hard drive, "was from the first year you started Ellison Design, when you were still working out of the East End co-working space. You made me copy every system log manually back then, remember? No cloud, no shortcuts." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I remembered. He handed me the drive like it weighed more than the past 5 years combined. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he said. "But I never meant for it to go this far." "Then why did you plant the file?" He hesitated. "Because I thought they would stop if I gave them something. Just one thing. But they kept pushing. I didn't know what was worse, the betrayal or the fact that I'd almost expected it." I took the drive and walked out without another word. Back at Dana's office, she hooked it up to a clean terminal and ran diagnostics. I paced behind her, arms crossed, watching the screen fill with old folder trees and log entries. The timestamps. The raw code. Every edit, every line, untouched. Here, Dana said finally. This is the original marketing fund authorization file. Created on January 14th, 8:42 a.m. by you. Last edited 5 minutes later. That's the real version. Can you compare it to the doctored one? She opened a split view. The differences were surgical. Replaced account numbers, a clause inserted mid-paragraph, the signature field altered. Dana leaned back. Whoever faked this didn't just edit a PDF. They recreated your email environment. This took serious skill. Can we prove the forgery? Absolutely. Metadata signatures, IP logs, and now... She tapped the hard drive gently. The original as evidence. This question mark? This blows their case apart. Jason knocked and stepped in, holding his phone. Nora, you should see this. He handed it over. An email from Nicole. No subject. No greeting. Just a single line. You're really going to ruin the family like this? I stared at it, then handed it to Dana without a word. She closed her laptop slowly. What do you want to do? I met her eyes. I want a full public meeting. Cameras, recordings. Press Dana raised an eyebrow. Shareholder level? I want them all in the room. Let them see everything. The lies, the fraud, the signatures. I want the walls to echo with the truth. Jason grinned. So we're really doing this? I nodded. No more behind closed doors. No more protecting reputations that tried to destroy mine. The room went quiet as Dana began drafting a press release. Outside, clouds gathered, streaking the city in sharp contrast, like lines on a battlefield being drawn. As we packed up, Brandon stepped through the door. He looked paler than usual, guilt hanging off his frame like wet clothes. You do know, he said carefully. Nicole might not be the only one falsifying records, right? I turned slowly. What do you mean? He swallowed hard. There were emails I saw, shared accounts, metadata fingerprints. You might be focusing on Nicole, but someone else was working with her. The room fell silent. And just like that, the war widened. She told the board I was unstable. I brought proof she forged a $400,000 contract. The glass conference room at Ellison Group's parent headquarters was colder than I remembered, both in temperature and tone. Rows of leather chairs were filled with men and women in suits too expensive to wrinkle, faces that hadn't looked me in the eye since my family went on the offensive. The long oak table gleamed under fluorescent lights, and in the corner, a discreet red light blinked on the camera. This meeting was being recorded and streamed for transparency. Good. Let them all see. Nicole was already seated when I arrived, perched with rehearsed elegance, lips glossed and blouse pristine. She smiled faintly at me, the kind that warned of something planned, something polished and poisonous. Brandon followed me in, face unreadable. Dana walked at my side with a neat black folder hugged close to her chest. She wore courtroom gray, her war color. The chairman tapped his gavel. We're convened. Ms. Nicole Ellison, you asked for this special board session. You may proceed. Nicole stood, all composure and controlled breath. Thank you. Over the past year, I've watched with growing concern as Ms. Nora Ellison, once a valuable contributor, has exhibited behavior that calls her stability and judgment into question. There have been alarming financial inconsistencies, erratic decision-making, and a refusal to operate as a team member in a family-led enterprise. I believe her continued leadership puts the Ellison Group's reputation and future at risk. A soft murmur swept through the room. Cameras panned. She turned toward me, eyes glinting. In fact, she continued, I have brought statements from 3 clients expressing discomfort with Nora's temperament. One even claimed she... That's enough, I said calmly, rising. Nicole blinked. If we're playing with evidence, I said, then let's begin. I walked to the presentation monitor and clicked. The first slide flashed up. A scanned image of a $400,000 vendor contract dated 6 months ago, with my name printed neatly on the bottom. This, I said, was submitted under my name to authorize a luxury renovation deal that I never reviewed, never approved, and never signed. Dana stepped forward, her voice flat and commanding. Our firm has verified this document. The signature appears to match Ms. Ellison's on the surface, but metadata embedded in the PDF shows it was generated from an IP address registered to a temporary employee on the 10th floor. The next slide showed the metadata: timestamps, server IDs, location pins. And this, Dana said, tapping the screen, is the name of the temp, Jennifer Lang. She has since signed a notarized affidavit stating she was paid in cash to copy-paste a signature from a previous file, under the instruction that it was a rush task for internal use. Silence. Nicole's smile twitched. You forged a nearly $500,000 contract, Nicole, I said, letting the weight of the number settle over the room. You routed money into an account linked to your own LLC, and then you tried to deflect by calling me unstable? The chairman leaned forward. Is this true, Ms. Nicole Ellison? She didn't answer. We've also uncovered, Dana added, several login attempts into Ms. Nora Ellison's financial records, originating from your devices. One of the directors, the oldest among them, removed his glasses and exhaled. Ms. Nicole Ellison, given the seriousness of these claims and the evidence presented, we are placing you on administrative suspension effective immediately, pending a full audit and legal review. Nicole's expression fractured. You're taking her side? We're taking the side of proof, the chairman said. This is not about family. It's about facts. I looked across the room, finding Brandon seated still, hands clutched in front of him. The chair beside him turned slightly as one of the board members leaned toward him. You knew, the man said quietly, not accusing, just tired. You saw all of this. Why didn't you speak up earlier? Brandon didn't answer, but I saw it in his face. Guilt, and something else. Fear of what might come next, because this war wasn't over. And now more masks were cracking. It wasn't just a company scandal anymore. It was live on Channel 8. By the time I stepped out of the building, the crowd outside had already doubled. Microphones thrust forward, flashes popping like lightning, voices overlapping in a rising tide of speculation. I didn't stop. I didn't blink. I just walked, heels clicking sharp and steady against the marble floor of the lobby as Dana trailed behind me, whispering updates. It's everywhere, she muttered, holding up her phone. Clips of the board meeting. Edited, subtitled, reposted, over 200,000 views in an hour. I glanced over. My face stared back at me through the screen. Cool, composed, holding up a forged contract while Nicole shrieked in the background. The hashtag emblazoned below read, Number Nora was framed. It's gaining traction fast, Dana added. A few investors have already issued statements saying they're reviewing their positions. At a nearby crosswalk, Jason caught up, nearly breathless. It's not just Twitter. LinkedIn, Reddit threads. People are pulling receipts. Old franchise agreements. Stuff from 4-5 years ago. I frowned. Franchise? Yeah. He nodded, lowering his voice. A woman named Teresa Kane just posted a thread. Said she tried to open a branded interior design shop under Nicole's consultancy. Ended up signing away 60% ownership. Claims Nicole used forged partnership terms, nearly identical wording to what we just exposed. Dana's brows lifted. That's a pattern. If we can link her behavior across multiple cases, we can file for criminal conspiracy. I finished, pulse ticking faster. With multiple plaintiffs, not just me. Back at the office, the mood had shifted. Employees glanced up as I passed. Some hesitant, others nodding quietly. The silence wasn't cold anymore. It was expectant, charged. I sat in my glass-walled corner office and opened my email. 200 new messages. Investors, lawyers, strangers. Among them was a notification. The district court had formally accepted Dana's filing. Nicole was summoned for a hearing the following Monday. A chill ran down my spine. I opened a second window, pulled up the trending tab. The video of Nicole screaming about my instability had become a meme. People were remixing it, overlaying it with courtroom gavel sounds, inserting subtitles like, "When you gaslight your sister but forget she owns a scanner." Dana entered, holding a manila envelope. "One more thing," she said, sliding it onto my desk. A list of past contractors Nicole worked with. We're reaching out. Most of them have NDAs, but if they were signed under false pretenses... I nodded. The dominoes are falling. The sun had begun to dip when my screen flashed again. A new email, no sender name. Just a subject line. "She's not the root. Look closer." I clicked it open. Nicole was a pawn. "Follow the paper trail. Your father started it." Anonymous? I stared at the words, breath caught between disbelief and a terrible, blooming realization. Dana saw my face. "What is it?" I turned the screen toward her. She read it once, twice. Her mouth tightened. "You always said he was quiet during all this. Too quiet." I nodded slowly. The spotlight had found Nicole, but in the shadows, someone else was holding the strings. The louder they rose, the harder they crashed. The independent auditor's office was hidden inside a modest brick building on the east side of the city. No marble floors or glass elevators. Just creaky stairs and the smell of old paper. It felt right. Stripped of illusion, free of vanity. A place where numbers spoke louder than legacy. Dana sat beside me, flipping through a thick folder of ledgers and financial disclosures. Across from us, the auditor, a man named Kendrick with wire-rimmed glasses and an almost unnervingly calm tone, laid out the sequence. Falsified filings, overlapping payment trails, and the final smoking gun. A trail that led straight to Brandon's name. He was already there when we arrived, hunched in the corner chair, eyes red-rimmed. "You were part of this?" I asked, voice low, not accusing. "Not yet." He didn't meet my eyes. I was the mule. Dana stiffened beside me. "My father," Brandon said slowly, "had me set up a dummy company. 5 years ago, said it was to streamline a client bid. For family advantage." I didn't even know how deep it went until now. "Which project?" Dana asked, already flipping pages. "The Ridgeway redevelopment. The one you protested, Nora. The one you said was rigged." I remembered it clearly, my objections during a board vote, the way my voice was dismissed. The project passed by a single vote. "I was disqualified," I murmured. Brandon nodded. "They took your voting rights away, claimed you missed too many meetings. I only just found the paperwork. The signatures were there. Your name wasn't." A silence settled over the room like ash. Kendrick passed me a copy of the board's amended bylaws. The change had been filed 3 years ago, without my knowledge. A decision signed off by Charles Ellison, my own father. "I thought Nicole was the one pulling strings," I said. "But he's the architect." Dana placed her phone on the table and hit play. The audio was scratchy from a voice recorder tucked away years ago in Brandon's apartment. But the voice was unmistakable. My father, calm and deliberate. "She wasn't meant to lead. She's brilliant, yes, but soft. She listens too much. She doubts. She'll never be ready." Another voice. Brandon's, quiet, almost pleading. "She gave up everything for the company." My father. And that's exactly why she's dangerous. Sentiment doesn't build empires. Control does. The room pulsed with rage I hadn't known I'd been holding. When we left the building, the sky was steel gray. A storm was coming. Brandon walked beside me, but I kept a small distance between us. His betrayal wasn't complete, but it was deep. "Why now?" I asked. "Why tell me?" He looked up at the clouds. "Because I thought I was protecting something. Turns out it was a lie." Dana got the call first. Our office line forwarded to her phone. I heard the sharp intake of breath before she turned to me. "Your father's lawyer. They've filed suit." "For what?" "Deliberate defamation. publicly harming the family's business interests. I laughed. It was short, hollow. They burned the house down, I said, and now they're suing the ash. But inside, my pulse quickened. Not with fear, but clarity. So this is what power looks like when it's cornered. It sues its own blood. ChatGPT Jan Noi. Hoja Jelai Cho Toi Kong Gingguai Tro. I built a fire from them. The hospital corridor smelled like disinfectant and regrets. I stood at the end of it, watching through the narrow rectangular glass pane as my mother lay propped up against stiff pillows. The nurse said it was a minor stroke, brought on by stress, likely, but her eyes were too lucid, her spine too straight, for me to believe this was weakness. She'd always known when to appear fragile. She turned her head as I pushed open the door. Her voice was soft, but each word landed with precision. I heard you walked out, signed it all away. I said nothing. My legal folder was still in my bag, warm from the grip I'd kept on it during the ride here. She saw it in my posture before I opened my mouth. Your father, she said, eyes narrowing, was wrong. He was ruthless. But Nora, this name, Ellison, it's still yours. I sat down, slower than I felt. My limbs were taut. The lines on my face felt sharper this morning, not from fatigue, but from clarity. I used to think that too, I said, that blood and names and legacy meant something sacred, but they only meant silence, and debt, and surrender. Her lips pressed together, the fine lines around them deepening. I never asked you to protect the family, she said. I smiled bitterly. But you never stopped them either. She looked away. Outside in the garden below, nurses pushed a wheelchair along the path. Everything here was carefully maintained, sterile, like a museum of dignity. Do you think I wanted this life? She whispered. Your father made the rules. I just lived inside them. That's the thing, I replied. I stopped living inside other people's rules the moment I sent that cease and desist. She blinked, and the tears didn't come. Good. Neither did mine. By the time I left the hospital, the sun had moved past its harshest peak. Dana was already waiting for me at the property law office, papers neatly arranged in front of her. Jason had texted that the last of my belongings from the Ellison building had been cleared. This is it, Dana said, handing me the last page. A waiver of inheritance rights, voluntarily executed, witnessed and notarized. By signing, I would walk away from every stake, every family trust, every gilded chain dressed up as wealth. I didn't hesitate. The pen glided across the bottom. Dana passed me another file. Thicker, weightier. Application for your new LLC. You'll be the founding CEO. So will 3 others. Women who came forward after Nicole's downfall. The ones she tricked into false partnerships. I flipped the first page. The name shimmered across the top. Ash and Light Collective. I thought you might want something symbolic, Dana said. New from the ruin. I want something honest, I murmured. Something that doesn't apologize for being born out of fire. Outside, a small press circle had gathered. I'd expected it. The Nora Ellison story wasn't just a family scandal anymore. It was a national conversation. One of them stepped forward as I approached. Mike extended. Miss Ellison, Nora, just one question. Will you testify against your father in court? I stopped, met her eyes, and smiled. Not bitter, not triumphant, just certain. Yes. I dropped my last name. I picked my future. The lights above the stage were warm, not blinding. They tilted at just the right angle, casting long golden lines across the auditorium floor where 200 folding chairs had been arranged in neat rows. Each one filled. Reporters, young founders, former allies, former skeptics. And in the front row, Dana, her expression fierce and proud. The velvet backdrop behind me bore a single phrase. Second Start Foundation. I stepped up to the podium. No teleprompter. Just breath and memory. and a fire that had burned clean through the ruins of my family name. When I was 21, I began, I thought sacrifice meant love. That giving everything to protect a legacy built by others was noble. That if I endured enough, silently, gracefully, I would eventually be handed a place at the table. A murmur moved through the crowd. But silence doesn't earn you a seat, and grace without recognition becomes erasure. I paused, looked at the sign again, felt the weight in my chest shift. I don't carry the Ellison name anymore. I carry mine. Dana smiled from her seat, her knuckles tight around the arms of her chair. My name is Nora Marin, and I built this not from inheritance, not from tradition, but from survival, from rage, from other women's stolen futures. And today we build something that cannot be stolen. The applause that followed felt like thunder wrapped in warmth. Outside, the sky was gray but brightening, that strange liminal glow just before dusk. I moved through the crowd, shaking hands, hugging women who whispered their own stories in fragments: abandonment, bankruptcy, erasure. Every sentence was a mirror. Near the press booth, Dana handed me a white envelope. "It came this morning," she said. "No return address?" I knew the handwriting instantly. Brandon. Inside was a single page, handwritten. I don't expect forgiveness. I expect nothing. But I couldn't leave without saying this. You were always the one meant to lead. I just didn't know how to follow something that wasn't fear. I've left the city. I hope someday that's enough. I folded the letter once, slipped it into my coat pocket. That was all the closure I needed. Meanwhile, the trial had begun without fanfare. Nicole sat alone, dressed in navy, her once carefully sculpted image now hollow. The gallery was empty. No family, no press. Only a court clerk typing each word as her attorney asked for leniency. No one came to defend the fallen daughter of Ellison Industries. Justice rarely wears gold. Sometimes it wears dust. Later that afternoon, an executive from Greenhaven Capital stepped onto the stage and handed me a sealed folder. Inside, confirmation of $2 million in unrestricted seed funds, committed to the Second Start Foundation's national expansion. "You earned this," she said quietly. "Not with your name, with your truth." I didn't cry. I'd cried enough over boardrooms and bloodlines. I simply nodded, shook her hand, and looked out over the faces of the women who would take the next step with me. As the crowd began to thin, a young girl, no more than 15, walked slowly up the center aisle. Her backpack hung heavy on one shoulder. Her eyes were steady, but something about her silence caught me. When she finally spoke, it was barely a whisper. "You helped me leave my family too." I knelt just a bit, to her level. She didn't flinch. "What's your name?" I asked. She hesitated, then lifted her chin. "Mine," she said. "Just mine." And together we stood in the light. No father, no manipulator, no chains, just names we chose, and the futures we refused to surrender. The courtroom may have emptied, the headlines may have faded, but the reckoning had already carved itself into history. What began as betrayal within bloodlines ended as a public awakening, where silence no longer protected the powerful. Justice doesn't always come with applause. It arrives with evidence, resolve, and the courage to burn what once confined you. Like the final strike of a judge's gavel, truth lands slowly, but it echoes forever. Sometimes, to inherit peace, one must first renounce a name. Like, share and subscribe if this story resonated with you. Comment 1 if you felt her pain, or 2 if you believe she should have gone even further.